Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Lauren Kirchner, investigative reporter at Consumer Reports, on the massive Forever Chemicals lawsuit going on right now. Also on the program, Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate, on the quiet Republican force fighting electric vehicles. New report, Sam Alito took a luxury fishing vacation with a Republican billionaire who had cases in front of the court. Meanwhile, a federal judge strikes down Arkansas's gender-affirming healthcare ban as unconstitutional. U.S. now rejecting asylum seekers at a dramatically higher rate than we were pre-COVID. New York State passes a bill to protect abortion providers sending pills into states with abortion bans. Virginia primary results, good for Youngkin, but also good for Democrats who want to protect those same abortion rights. New report, testing shows ongoing learning gap in the wake of COVID for 13-year-olds. Lena Khan at the FTC sues Amazon for the first time ever over their Prime inducement. And Gannett Media sues Google for monopolistic ad practices. And lastly, judge orders George Santos bail funders to be revealed tomorrow. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Emma Vigeland out today. Oh, we should say this. You're going to want to tune in tomorrow because Emma has an announcement of something that she's doing. It's not leaving the show or trying to poison me or anything like that or anything, nefarious.
As far as you know.
As far as I know. That she would not announce that publicly, obviously. But she has an announcement that I am quite sure 99.99% of you are going to be super psyched about. Let me just say this. You want to block off your morning, Friday morning. I don't know what your plans were. Cancel them now. Trust me on this. Emma will tell you more tomorrow. I know what I'm going to be doing Friday morning when I'm supposed to be prepping for the show. But she will talk more about this tomorrow. So make sure that you check it out tomorrow. Let's get into the story. Fascinating thing happened with this story of Sam Alito. This guy has paper-thin skin and is very nervous. You'll remember that John Roberts came out with an announcement, what was this, like 2 weeks ago, where he was like, we're going to double down on ethics efforts. And ProPublica came out with a story last night. What was it, last night? Or was it... I don't know
last night.
Did it drop it last night?
The
Yeah,
ProPublica story, yeah.
And written by Justin Elliott, Joshua Kaplan, and Alex Majerewski. And it tells the story of Sam Alito back in July of 2008, who took a fishing trip to Alaska. You can see there's pictures of, and those are big salmon. Whoa,
Yeah,
those are big
good
salmon.
haul there. Good salmon in Alaska.
And I mean, we can argue about Pacific salmon versus Atlantic salmon. Atlantic salmon have a little more fat content, and so they're a little bit tastier. Pacific salmon, maybe some of those, it doesn't matter. Nevertheless, taking a fishing trip to Alaska, that's fun. It's really fun when you don't have to fly commercial, because a billionaire flies you on his jet worth $100,000 if you had to charter that jet yourself. He was sent there by Paul Singer, a hedge fund billionaire who has had multiple, since 2008, multiple cases in front of the Supreme Court. And I will tell you Alito's response, and we know it not because he responded to the reporter's request for a comment. In fact, when the reporters reached out for comments for their piece, the Supreme Court said, he's not going to answer this at all. But we still know what his response is, because if you have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, you can check it out. I think it's behind a paywall. So, which is appropriate, all things considered. But Alito had a response. But before we get to his response, and to be clear, one of the things that you should understand about this is why someone would put their response out at the same time. Just the fact that I had to interrupt my retelling of the story is part of the reason why that's done. But we'll get to that. Alito did not report the 2008 fishing trip on his annual financial disclosures. By failing to disclose the private jet flight Singer provided, Alito appears to have violated federal law that requires justices to disclose most gifts. It's according to ethics law experts. Whatever that means. Charles Gith, an Indiana University law professor, one of those coastal elites, and a leading expert on recusal, says, if you were good friends, what are you doing ruling on his case? And if you weren't good friends, what are you doing accepting this? He said, referring to the flight of on the private jet. Apparently, another wealthy businessman provided expensive vacations to two members of the high court, ProPublica found. On his Alaska trip, Alito stayed at a commercial fishing lodge owned by this businessman, who was also a major conservative donor. 3 years before, the same businessman flew Antonin Scalia, who died in 2016, on a private jet to Alaska and paid the bill for his stay. I mean, so there is a long, robust tradition of Republican appointed judges and conservative judges accepting these type of gifts from wealthy business. But we already know Clarence Thomas and his whole Harlan Crow bromance. I wonder if they each get their own, like when they get sworn in, they go back to the Supreme Court, like, like green room or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And there, in some type of blood oath, they get their own billionaire, like sort of war? like a mentor or an advisor type of situation that you might get at like a new school or something like that. I know that Saul is like a reading buddy for a kid in kindergarten when he gets into 5th grade. I don't know if it's the same type of thing where you get your own billionaire and they'll take you on their own trips and that type of thing. Leonard Leo, the longtime leader of the Conservative Federalist Society, attended and helped organize the Alaska fishing vacation. Gosh, what a coincidence. All these guys involved in law. Singer and the lodge owner were both major donors to Leo's political groups. What a coincidence. They just all seem to be interested in the same stuff. Must be fun sitting around the dinner table there.
Being impartial.
Totally. Apparently, according to the, and they did extensive reporting here, They talked to people who worked there. They looked at phishing licenses. They looked at emails. And I wonder how they got those emails. That would be curious. I'd be curious to find that out. Another guest told ProPublica the trip was a gift from Arkley. That is the owner of a mortgage company that also owned this phishing thing. A planning document prepared by Lodge describes Alito as a guest of Arkley. 2 Lodge employees said they were told Alito was not paying. In the last decade, Singer has contributed over $80 million to Republican political groups, millions to the Manhattan Institute. This institute regularly files friend of the court briefs with the Supreme Court. At least 15 this term. And we should say, Singer is the chairman of the Manhattan Institute. So it's not just like he's like, he's literally on the masthead. He has a fund that manages $15 billion in assets. These are just some of the highlights. Singer's fund asked the Supreme Court to intervene multiple times on a court case involving Argentina that ultimately paid off by $2.6 billion. Just so many coincidences here. This was a commercial property rather than a vacation home, and therefore it is the typical interpretation of the ethics law requires disclosure if you're staying at a lodge. There is a personal hospitality exemption if you go to someone's private home, but this was a commercial lodge, although it was owned by somebody. So, like everything is. He did not disclose that in his financial disclosure form. Again, he did not recuse himself in any of these cases. And he, instead of answering the questions that ProPublica posed to him, like I say, he somehow had the wherewithal all by himself to prepare to write up an essay for the Wall Street Journal, have it placed there, and refute all these charges on the day that the ProPublica article came out. And the reason why you do this is so that you don't theoretically have a 2-day news cycle. The ProPublica piece would be a news cycle until tomorrow, and then if he responded to it, then it would extend it for another day, and this way he gets it all wrapped up. The recusal is hilarious. He says, my recollection is I have spoken to Mr. Singer on no more than a handful of occasions. All of which,
fishing trip.
Well, he didn't go on I don't know if Singer went on the fishing trip. Singer just had his plane go there.
Okay, right.
With the exception of small talk during a fishing trip 15 years ago. Or maybe he was on the fishing trip.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, Singer is, I think, the guy in the photo. One of the guys holding.
So he
the
was
salmon.
on the fishing trip.
I've only talked to him a few times. Like the one time I'm like, hey, grab the net. I got a big one on the line.
We got a big
Right.
one.
Or at dinner every night in the lodge. It consisted of brief and casual comments at events attended by large groups. On no occasion have we discussed the activities of his business. We've never talked about any case or issue before the court. On 2 occasions, he introduced me before I gave a speech, as have dozens of other people. I don't know if those dozens of other people have also provided him $100,000 worth of plane trips. And as I will discuss, he allowed me to occupy what would have otherwise been an unoccupied seat on a private flight to Alaska. That's funny. You know, if I hadn't taken this bribe, the money would have been spent somewhere else.
That's not good.
You didn't make the money up for me.
Can you just go to the airport and be like, hey, you got open seats, right? I can just
I just hop on
get
that.
on there.
There's no value to that. During my time on the court, I have voted on approximately 100,000 certiorari petitions. The vast majority received little attention from justices. because even a cursory examination reveals they do not meet our requirements for review. Apparently, Singer had a couple of those things in the past. I mean, nice to know that they spend that much time on reviewing some of these court cases. I guess a lot of that time has to be filled up writing op-eds for Wall Street Journal, defending yourself from taking all of these services in kinds. As for the flight, Mr. Singer and others had already made arrangements to fly to Alaska when I was invited shortly before the event. And I was asked whether I would like to fly there in that seat. Like,
and you should.
No, I'm gonna fly commercial because I'm a judge and I can't accept $100,000 worth of private plane.
Wouldn't most judges wouldn't that be their thought process? Like, oh yeah, I'll have to pay you for that. I can't accept that otherwise it is very illegal. Not like, oh, this is last minute. Let's go get some fish.
Or if you were convinced there was nothing wrong with it, you just disclose it.
Right.
I stayed for 3 nights in a modest one-room unit at the King Solomon Salmon Lodge, which was comfortable but rustic facility.
Okay, well, as long as it's rustic, it's okay.
You know, it's not like the apparently the Ritz-Carlton that they have by the river in Alaska. As I recall, the meals were home-style fare.
Oh my God!
As opposed to like what?
Sushi.
And if there was wine, it certainly was not wine that cost $1,000. He didn't pay for any of it, so he doesn't know what
how
was
would
served.
you know? There's zero chance that was cheap wine. Yeah, it was barefoot
Right.
Moscato.
I'm not paying for any of this, but I'd like a breakdown of the bill just to, satiate, so I can tell a story. Yep, that's what I thought. Not $1,000 bottle of wine. Sheldon Whitehouse put up this thread by Sheldon Whitehouse. Had some great questions to ask and does so in a way. First, who orchestrated this weird pre-buttal with the infamous Wall Street Journal polluter page? And did Alito get help from a PR firm? If so, who paid? Which is a decent question to ask. Second, and this is the thing. Alito felt he didn't have to report the plane trip because he considers a plane a facility. And supposedly when it comes to personal hospitality, you don't have to pay for use of a facility. And White House says, seriously, who in real life calls a plane a facility? Maybe the airport, maybe the hangar, but the plane? Been flying all my life and never once heard that term used.
The facility is going through some turbulence right now.
Exactly. And why dwell on the term facility, White House asks, but not mention that the personal hospitality, quote, reporting exemption is specifically limited only to food, lodging, and entertainment. And who goes on a fishing trip for accommodations? Because the whole argument is that you have a personal exemption for accommodations, but that's not what's going on there. They got guides. They got presumably like little boats to take you there. They got maybe gear. Who knows?
Outfitters entirely.
Who goes on a fishing trip for accommodations? Don't people go on fishing trips for the fishing? Isn't that the real gift value at issue here? Did Alito really jet to Alaska to spend time in the lodge? Did he fish in the tub? Third, why not ask the Financial Disclosure Committee of the Judicial Conference, the body set up exactly for that purpose, for its advice on what should be disclosed? That's why it's there. And what? He just happened to be flying to Alaska and there just happened to be a private jet going to Alaska with an empty seat. And he just happened to find that out like on some weird billionaire share ride Uber. Oh, and that empty seat trick would that fly with legislative or executive ethics disclosures? The answer is no. And how about with the Financial Disclosure Committee? Right, you didn't ask. This just keeps getting worse. And there it is. I mean, it's just one more example of how sort of like corrupt it is. And, for people who say stuff like, why do we care about any type of diversity? Ask yourself if KBJ is getting invited on any fishing trips. with some billionaire hedge fund people.
The Manhattan Institute has already like greased the skids with cash.
It really is amazing how sort of corrupted that process is and how above it they all are, and how Alito, if he felt he had done nothing wrong, why is he running to the Wall Street Journal op-ed pages? Why not just let legal scholars who are involved in ethics find that the ProPublica piece was wrong? And the reason why he won't do that is because ethics experts were all quoted throughout the ProPublica piece. Really unbelievable. We got a couple of words for our sponsors, and then we'll be talking to Lauren Kirchner, investigative reporter, Consumer Reports, and my producer when I did Seder on Sundays back at Air America 15 years ago. So stick around for that. Meanwhile, a word from our sponsor. You got so much of the world that is digitized and automated. Why stick to old school mailing and shipping? Why do that? Why take your packages that you're selling for your small business or your Depop sales or even your mid-sized business? Why take them down and get your postage one thing at a time? If you mail or ship often, let stamps.com do the hard part for you. You print postage and shipping labels right from your home or your office. It is ready to go in minutes. No long lines, no leaving your office. It's the middle of the summer, walking through the sweat, carrying the packaging. You basically have a post office in your office. Stamps.com has the best discounts in the industry for USPS postage and for UPS. You got up to 84% off. Plus, Stamps.com automatically tells you your cheapest and fastest shipping options. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. You can get access to the U.S. Postal Service and UPS services you need right from your computer anytime, day or night. 24/7, 365. No lines, no traffic, no waiting. Stamps.com has a long-standing relationship with both the U.S. Postal Service and UPS, and they're able to pass on amazing rates to you. Like I say, 84% off. With Stamps.com, all you need is a computer and a printer. They'll even send you a free scale, so you have everything you need to get started. If you need a package pickup, you can easily schedule it through your Stamps.com dashboard. And if you sell products online, Stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. The whole thing works like clockwork. Doesn't matter. If you're selling, let's say, seeds, for instance, you use Stamps.com. It doesn't matter if you're selling stuff via Depop. I just say that because that's what my daughter does. Or I don't know, you're selling stuff with eBay or Etsy. It doesn't matter, any of that stuff. Stamps.com has you covered. You can avoid the hassle. Get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with the promo code Majority Report. You'll get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial. Folks, when I was doing all the DVDs for our membership back in the day, Stamps.com was what made it doable for me. Bottom line. Helps my kid selling the stuff that she sells online. Helps us with selling the seeds. You got to check it out. You can get a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale with the promo code Majority Report. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, enter the code Majority Report. Makes it super easy and cheaper for you. Also, this episode brought to you by Zippix Nicotine Toothpicks. Zippix makes it much easier for you to stop filling your lungs with smoke or with vape. You can get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere, without having to rely on those nasty cigarettes or those, God knows what's in those vape things. Zippix Toothpicks gives you an easier and a healthier and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They have options in 2 milligram and 3 milligram of nicotine. They're perfect for flights, for sporting events, restaurants, literally anywhere, everywhere else that smoking and vape are banned. And it's a great way to start to get rid of your cigarettes, get rid of your vape, and replace them with something that's also going to provide you a relief for your oral fixation. I know that's the way I stopped smoking. And now these are the ones that I use. Zippix also offers caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks. They got a couple of different flavors. This one's the cinnamon and spearmint. And this is a great bridge off of your nicotine habit. Zippix has already helped tens of thousands of customers leading a healthier lifestyle. If you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy. Make anybody around you who has a nose happy. Make your, God knows what other organs are under pressure because you're vaping. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks today. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vape, get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com and get 10% off your first order by using the code majority at checkout. Your lungs are going to be glad you did. Just a disclaimer, the product contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical, and you must be 21 or older to order. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. And lastly, this episode also brought to you by sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, get 20% off. They have great tinctures with melatonin, tinctures with CBD. They have CBD with in fudge and coffee. They have CBD smokables and flowers and keef. They have lotions with CBD. They have salves with arnica and CBD that help with your muscle aches. For me, also helps with my eczema. This is a great company, great product. All of their product is tested by third parties. You can get a sense of exactly what's in there, the different types of CBD that's in there. I think it's like A and G, all of it broken down with levels, get a sense of what works for you and what doesn't. Just great products, great all-around company, great farming practices, no pesticides, integrated pest management they use. They use regenerative farming. There are also movement partners. These guys have given thousands of dollars to things like strike funds and refugee resettlement and criminal justice reform, food pantries. They are mostly employee owned. They have a $20 minimum wage, just an all-around great company. sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, which they came up with, for 20% off. sunsetlakesebede.com. Quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Lauren Kirchner. Right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland is off. It is such an honor and a privilege to welcome to the program Lauren Kirchner. She's an investigative reporter at Consumer Reports and my producer from Air America on Cedars on Sundays. Lauren, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
There's a lot of people. Great to see you again. It's great to see you too. And this is probably the last time we this is how it used to be on Sundays all the time.
Yes.
Way back when, before any of this commercial like video stuff did, somebody had built some apparatus for us, and that's the way we stayed in touch. And now you're covering this massive multi-district litigation case involving PFAS. I think this audience is somewhat aware of PFAS just because it's been something that I've been covering when I go down to Vegas for this mass torts conference. But tell us what PFAS are, and then we'll get into like what a multi-district litigation is, and then specifically what the litigation is.
Sure. PFAS, it's an acronym, PFAS, per and polyfluorinated substances. It's a class of thousands of chemicals, man-made chemicals, developed way back in the 40s by 3M and manufactured by 3M and DuPont mostly, and some other companies. Originally developed for their non-stick and waterproof properties, used in things like Teflon frying pans, Scotch Guard waterproofing spray for shoes and raincoats and things like that. But they're often called forever chemicals because as the science has sort of caught up, we now realize how hard it is for them to degrade in the environment and also in the human body. And these are chemicals that have they were developed for certain purposes, but they've now sort of pervaded, there's a lot of industrial uses, a lot of consumer products that contain them. And this particular lawsuit that I was writing about focuses on firefighting foam that has PFAS as its main ingredient. And that has been a way that that PFAS has entered the environment in a lot of places and contaminated soil and drinking water.
And because it's a forever chemical, it doesn't break down. It just doesn't go away. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you spray on some, military base, it gets into the water supply. It just travels through the water. It gets into the fish. It just never dissipates anywhere. And we should say, like, the big case that sort of like introduced PFAS to the world was this case that they actually made that movie Dirty Waters about, where which started in the late 90s, where this guy, Rob Billette, sort of handled a case for a farmer in Ohio who saw his cows were dying. They were foaming at the mouth. It was near a DuPont factory, and DuPont was making these nonstick pans, buying from 3M at one point this chemical C8, which was used in the manufacture of this Teflon. And then 3M got out of the business because they're like, this stuff is bad. And now we know how much they knew. Even then, like in that case, ultimately, Mike Papantonio was involved by the end in DuPont. I think they lost, like, it was a $1.6 billion settlement, something to that. I think it broke the company in half, or they attempted to, essentially, because there was about 3,500 people within a radius of that factory that ended up getting some type of disease as a function of this. So this case is another iteration, but they seem to have found even more. They have found even more, I guess, evidence that 3M knew just how bad this stuff was.
Yeah, in all these lawsuits that have been happening over the past few decades, there's been a lot of internal records that have come out, and especially in this current case, focusing on what these companies knew and when they knew it. I mean, internal memos and emails and documents, well, not emails because we're talking about the 1970s, but internal memos going back to the 70s, where, these companies employ many, many scientists. They're doing their own internal scientific studies all the time. But the point is they were not sharing their findings with anyone outside the company or with their employees about, what they had found about the hazards of these chemicals, or with regulators. The EPA didn't get all of these studies until like 2000. And by that time, it's already pervaded the environment. 3M had performed 1,000 studies and sort of handed them over all at once in 2000. And EPA only then started to really catch up and catch on about the dangers of this stuff, and are really only regulating this stuff in drinking water this year. So that's what struck me in learning about this stuff, is just how, like, the time span of this has just been amazing, that these chemicals were developed so long ago, but the findings about how harmful they are to humans, it was just kept secret for so long.
Is that the normal process? Is it like we as a society leave it up to the people who develop these chemicals? We leave it up to them to report to the EPA, for instance, how safe it is. And then like, is there like criminal culpability associated with this? Could the EPA have sued under like civil statutes? Like, what is the responsibility of a 3M if they, A, for them to do these studies, and B, to report what their findings are?
Yeah, I mean, the regulation of toxic chemicals in this country is very passive, where the EPA is sort of, they just don't have the authority to block manufacturing of these things. Companies will develop new, there's a crazy fire engine outside
No
my
worry
house.
about it.
Companies will develop new chemicals for new uses and start selling them, and EPA will come in after the fact and test them every once in a while. But the corporations don't need to like get clearance in order to put this stuff out into the world. They manufacture it and then hope for the best. EPA just doesn't really have a lot of authority as opposed to something like the EU or other places in the world.
Do they not have the authority, like the legislative, the statutory authority, or is it they don't have the resources, or is it both?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, you see in this administration, under the Biden administration, the EPA is really starting to use its authority to limit stuff like PFAS. Like last year, they proposed designating PFAS as hazardous substances under the Superfund law, which, would be really big. And this year, they proposed new drinking water limits for PFAS, which they've never done before. They've put out sort of health advisories saying, like, we've sort of found that this stuff is very bad at this level, but never made a rule that public water authorities had to actually limit it themselves. That's very new this year. So under this administration, EPA is looks like it's more willing to use its authority, but then also at the same time, like you see the Supreme Court trying to limit the small authority that it does have. So it's an interesting time.
Well, I want to get to sort of like, because I think people, when they hear like, oh, firefighting foam, like how pervasive can that be? But before we get there, are there any cases that are trying to inhibit the EPA's authority to regulate PFAS? In other words, is that also like a dual track setup, or because I wonder, like, under what is the argument by the plaintiffs in these cases that it really has nothing to do. A lot of times you get cases like this that are, here the EPA has set certain standards and you have not met them. And it's almost like they're working as like private sheriffs, using the existing law to sue someone for non-compliance with that law. In fact, there's a antitrust lawsuit from Gannett to Google that is, they're just suing them under antitrust laws. You could do theoretically the same thing if the EPA has said this is above or below certain limits. That these cases don't hinge on that. They just hinge on, you've put out a product that is harmful. But is there an attempt to sort of like question whether the EPA can do that? Because once the EPA sort of has that finding too, it's going to increase the liability, it seems to me, of these companies that did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good questions. I know that the manufacturers of PFAS who have been, liable for all this stuff and who are defendants in this case that I wrote about did sue the EPA, or attempted to sue the EPA, when they proposed new drinking water limits and when they proposed the Superfund designation. And that case was thrown out by a judge, but I don't remember what the argument was there. The defense in this multi-district litigation that the PFAS manufacturers have put out, they've tried several defenses. One of them was the government contractor immunity defense, that they shouldn't be liable for any harm because they developed this firefighting foam with PFAS as its main ingredient at the request of the government. They were contractors. And so it's actually the government, the military, that should be held responsible for the damage it caused. The federal judge overseeing this case didn't throw that out, but said that the case should not be thrown out for that reason. The defendants can still argue that at trial if a trial occurs. But they said basically that the manufacturers had the information about the harms of this product and they didn't share it with their main customer, the government. And so you can't be responsible for the harm if you're not aware of it. Someone from the Naval Research Center said that that he himself and the people in the Navy didn't know what the main ingredient of this firefighting foam was because the manufacturers had claimed, that it was a trade secret, basically.
Right. Yeah, they want to blame it on the government for putting it in there, but they also want to maintain any ability to make profits off it. Right. Give us a sense of like how ubiquitous, because when I first heard about firefighter foam, I'm like, that sounds like a very narrow case. But when you start to add up all of the places where this firefighting foam is deployed, just even on like, you got to practice with it and it does not dissipate. So every tiny drop you put in sort of travels like, I don't know, almost like a dollar bill you put into the economy. It goes all over the place over the course, except for difference with the dollar bill is it ultimately tears or gets burnt by the treasury. This does not go away.
Right. Firefighting foam sounds a little bit random or niche, but it's important because of the sheer quantity of it that's used. For many decades, the military used it at every single military installation to have on hand in case there was a fire. It's this particular type of firefighting foam that's meant for jet fuel, gasoline-based fires. It does a really good job of just like smothering the fire very quickly. And it's used by just spraying like many, many, many gallons at a thing. So you picture like engulfing an entire jet or an airplane or a car that's on fire. And so every military installation had this stuff on hand. Every airport, the AFFF, this foam was just absolutely everywhere. Local firehouses had it. And they were not only using it to put out fires, but like you said, for training. And the stuff is just, it's foam, it flies away, it's liquid, it goes into the soil or the groundwater near an airport or a military base of any kind or a firehouse. They find it, this stuff, and it sticks around. And people have only stopped using this stuff like this year. It's just been used for so long. And so that's what this case is about. It's about PFAS, but it's using the firefighting foam to sort of focus it.
What's really was amazing about, like I've heard this story before, but you cover how in 1975, as early as 1975, there were scientists who found this new chemical in blood samples. And that's also, even the idea of finding a new chemical is pretty extraordinary because it's very hard to find a chemical when you're not looking for it. And you can't look for a chemical if you don't know what it is.
Right.
They must have just stumbled on something by chance that the other things that they were testing for in that blood sample flagged something else there, which rarely happens. Which is, of course, also like, you don't know if it's in your water if you're not testing for that. When people get their water tested, they have no reason to test for a PFAS because they may not even know it exists. And so they reached out to 3M in 1975 to help identify it. Was that a coincidence? Or like, I mean, was it just that like they had reason to believe that 3M was developing it or what?
That I don't know why they reached out to 3M right away, or if they reached out to other chemical manufacturers as well. I think 3M was just, one of the big chemical manufacturers in the game at the time. And so they thought, if anybody's going to be developing some new novel man-made weirdo chemical that we've never seen before, maybe it's them. And so, yeah, they called up 3M and said, we found this strange compound. We're very curious about it. Is this something that you are working on? And internal memos from 3M show that whoever answered the phone said, that's very interesting. Let me pass that up the chain. And
it only took 25 years, literally 25 years or 23 years for them to reveal to the EPA that that PFAS were in the blood of the general population. Like everybody, more than likely, every single person listening to us right now has some PFAS in them because it has gotten in there through their water, through their food, through maybe, maybe the air. Is it possible for it to come through the air? Or is it something that you have to ingest?
Ingestion is the main way that people get it in their bodies, but it is also in the air. When things are incinerated and it goes up into the air and then falls down onto the soil. It's a whole life cycle. I mean, newborn babies are born with PFAS in their blood as well.
This is a multi-district litigation, which means that this litigation has happened in different districts around and it's been combined in one court case in, I think it's Georgia. Is that right?
Yes. The main plaintiff for this first part of it was in Stewart, Florida, but it's being argued in South Carolina. I just had to remember
South Carolina, right? Yeah. And in fact, I think it is like Papantonio's firm that is representing Stewart, Florida, or at least some of them. But there's a bunch of other plaintiffs. Who are the defendants? And when the city gets paid for it, like what is the idea that the cities or the municipalities or the counties or whoever these jurisdictions are looking for when they get paid out? What are they looking for?
They're looking for money to help them treat the water. Because it's sort of been spurred on by recent EPA new regulations, as the EPA is going to start limiting how much PFAS are allowed in drinking water. Public water authorities then have to pay for that. They have to pay for the treatment of their water for their customers. And so that sort of inspired a lot of water authorities, cities, counties, entire states. I mean, there's like 15 states also suing in this case. So the first part of the case was focused on water authorities. And then there are going to be subsequent parts of the case where it'll be individual, like property damage, people whose personal wells have been contaminated. There's people who have gotten sick from who they believe that they've gotten sick from exposure to PFAS. There's firefighters who have worked with this stuff, veterans who have worked with this stuff who, believe they have gotten sick because of it. So there's going to be, personal injury lawsuits. It's going to be a very long process. And I was just writing about this first process, just about water authorities. But you had asked who the defendants were. The defendants are 3M, DuPont, Chemours, which Chemours is a spin-off company that came from DuPont originally.
When they tried to get out of, I think the last penalty that in that C8 case.
Yes. So DuPont now says, we don't manufacture PFAS because Chemours does. But then there's also all these like other smaller companies that manufacture firefighting foam, companies you probably haven't heard of, but that have made the foam for decades using the ingredients developed by 3M and DuPont.
Well, it's a fascinating case. Great story. Folks folks can check it out at Consumer Reports. We're going to put a link at the YouTube and podcast. Lauren, great to see you again. Doing great work at Consumer Reports. Really appreciate you coming on today and talking to us about it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Send us your next story.
Okay.
I'll come
back anytime.
All right. Thanks. Folks, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Welcoming back to the program, Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate. Alex, you've been writing about, well, there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. Some of the pieces you've been writing over at Slate. I read just about everything you put out, incidentally, and it's always great. I can't recommend it enough. But you wrote about going to a conference and of car dealerships. And, you know, I feel like I've over the years had a sort of like peripheral notion of what car dealerships mean to the Republican Party and how much lobbying are, but I never realized to this extent. And tell us about what is this? It's a conference. People are going to party. I guess they didn't do it at Vegas this year because somebody said like too many divorces in the past led from that. But aside from the partying, what else is going on in the car dealership? First, talk about how well they did in the pandemic.
Yeah. So car dealers, I think, you know, one of the first things to say about them is that they generally do very, very well. It's an incredibly remunerative industry. And they have an astonishing array of legal protections, and they make money hand over fist. During the pandemic, they did better than they've ever done. The 2 years, 2+ years since COVID hit, they profit just shot up to an incredible degree. I think that they were making something like 180% more profit in 2020, 2021, 2022 than they were in 2019. So just huge increases on an already very, very profitable business. So the best 2-year period, I think, in the history of selling cars.
Will you explain how that happened? Do you know? Like, I mean, and I was interested to find out that their business is sort of like, I don't know, it's like the printer business. Like the printer doesn't, they don't make a big markup on the printer, but they keep getting you on the ink, which I didn't ever realize. That gets into the whole regulatory stuff and the laws that they lobby for. We could talk about that in a second. But why did they make so much money during the pandemic?
Well, there was supply chain problems. Obviously, we all sort of know well. So there was shortages of inventory, which meant that they could pretty much charge whatever they wanted. So, the sticker price or the MSRP was basically only a suggestion, and they were, levying these gigantic markups on new cars were hard to get a hold of. So new cars prices went through the roof. Used cars were hard to get a hold of. So used cars prices went through the roof. And it was just like a profit bonanza at a very basic level. Like the lack of inventory meant that they could do whatever they wanted. And because a lot of people were, leaving cities, there was a lot of, migration sort of internally within the United States. There was a lot of money being put into people buying cars, and it was a perfect storm for them.
So price gouging.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's price gouging because it's not, these cars are not costing them anymore. Now, I suppose, if you're a car dealer, you're like, well, we have less volume because we don't have the same demand. But if they're if they made up for their lack of volume in a price increase, they wouldn't have nearly 200% profits. They would have the same profit margin that they had before. But this was just like another example of basically of price gouging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that you alluded to, which is really critical to point out, is actually they don't even make the majority of their money on selling the cars. They make the majority of the money on service, on maintenance, on warranty, on financing. Like it's the ancillary stuff that is really where they rake it in. And so, all those things were obviously booming as well. The price the price gouging applied to many parts of the car owning and maintaining process.
And I would imagine that, people are taking their cars in more for repairs because they know that the cost of a new car is that much more expensive, and they're going out and buying. And I think the whole thing cascaded when like the rental car companies sold off their fleets because they weren't getting any business. But the interesting thing about this predominantly Republican owned business, like most of these people are Republicans or conservatives, I think that's fair to say, is that the reason why they do so well in servicing cars, the reason why they almost like have cornered the market, if you will, on these things is not because their service departments are so great. It's because, like every Republican who does not like regulation, it's okay in their industry. I mean, talk about the mechanisms in which that their service departments, their warranties, like all of these things are protected by state and local, and if there's any federal laws that essentially prop up this business, which seems to be really not that necessary.
Yeah, totally. I think that even if you could say even in a generous way that it's a pretty inessential business. The question of like what these record profits went to is something we don't really have to guess about, because car dealers are like the most politically organized and militant faction in the country when it comes to conservative politics. And so the reason they make so much and the reason they don't have to worry about these profits going away is because they have put this money directly into lobbying at the national, state, local level, into local campaigns, into state level campaigns and national campaigns. I mean, it's an incredibly elaborate political organization, and the protections that they've won are astounding. I mean, when I was doing the research for this piece, it was like all 50 states have some protections for car dealers. Like there's not a place, not in the bluest state in the country, are there not protections in place that shore up their industry. Some places it's so ridiculous where I think there are 16 states it's flat out illegal for a car manufacturer to sell a car. It's just against the law. And so like in a place like Texas, which actually has, a Tesla factories in it, if you buy a Tesla in Texas, it has to be shipped out of the state across state lines and then brought back in so that you can pick it up. In a place like Louisiana, you can't even do over the air software updates to your car, because that's a violation of the exclusive warranty and service protections that dealers have for cars. So you can't do that at all. And like places like New Mexico, if you want to get service on a car that didn't get bought from a dealership, you have to go to a Indian reservation to get it. Like the protections are so extreme, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like there are rules that you can't open a car dealership within X number of miles of another car dealership, and the contracts between car dealerships and car manufacturers are interminable. They can't be canceled by the manufacturers. It's just like there's basically no way. They basically headed off legally every possible way that they might lose money or business, and that's the sort of state of play.
And just to be clear, like that major protection is that car companies, broadly, there are exceptions. I want to talk about some of those, but car companies cannot sell directly to consumers. Now, I can see 50 years ago why there would be a challenging just logistically for a car company to do that. Maybe 60 years ago, 70 years ago, am I going to buy it through a car? But they could theoretically just set up a dealership where instead of you carrying 100 cars in inventory or 1,000 cars, all it is for them is like a showroom, and there's 5 cars there. These are the 5 cars and models we do. And you're talking to a, Chrysler representative there who could say, like, this is the car, that car, this, and they could sell it to you direct. And you could go, it would create all sorts of other ancillary businesses to repair these cars, because there's not one service shop that has a legal monopoly on this. And that's basically, when you talk about protections, that's what it is, right? Like they've basically outlawed competition, both to sell the cars and to service the cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it never occurred to me why these car dealers. Well, let's talk about Tesla for a minute, because I want to touch on DeSantis. But DeSantis, it came up in Florida in an interesting way, just like a couple of weeks ago, I guess. DeSantis signed some bill that enhanced the protections for all these car dealers, with an exemption for not all these different EV companies, just one, Tesla, right? Walk us through sort of that dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually it sort of is a perfect showcase of the political calculation for someone with national political ambitions in the GOP. So obviously Ron DeSantis launched his presidential campaign with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk.
I don't know if that's obvious, because a lot of people couldn't get through it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Rumor has it that this is what happened. And the way that Tesla is set up, obviously, is that they have no dealerships. They from the moment of their foundation decided not to engage with dealerships at all. They would only sell direct to consumer. And say what you will about Tesla. Obviously, people have very strong opinions for very good reason about Musk and Tesla and the whole deal. But that was a real serious threat to the dealer lobby and to that mode of business. And so DeSantis is kind of caught between these two poles, where he loves mega donors, right? He loves the billionaire class, and and someone like Musk, who's the richest person on the planet. If he comes knocking, DeSantis is going to say, absolutely, what can I do? And so that's why you have that relationship between the two of them. But at the same time, the car dealers are this incredibly formidable political network, and they don't just have a ton of money. They also have really important community relationships, because legally there's only allowed to be one car dealer for every community. So, in rural areas in particular, where they buy a bad space and they sponsor little league teams. And if you want to run against the car dealers apparatus, you are living dangerously, especially in Republican politics. And so despite DeSantis launching his campaign with the guy who's the enemy of, really the enemy of the car dealer faction broadly, he then turns around and signs these bills that lock in some of the most extreme protections for car dealers anywhere in the country, outlawing direct sales for every other car company, period, except for Tesla. So they get the one carve out. And then DeSantis also gets to placate these car dealers who have been donating millions of dollars to his campaign already, and already have a very sort of documented close relationship with him. And there you have the two sort of two major players in conservative politics. You have the billionaire class, and then you have the car dealers, and you pretty much need to have both on your team or you have no chance.
I want to talk about EVs, because it never occurred to me the implications of electric vehicles on this particular cohort. But why are they so Republican? Is it why are they so Republican? And we should say that they obviously lobby all politicians, because we see these protections in blue states almost as much, maybe not quite as severe as in these red states. He said there's 16 states where it's, just sort of off the charts. And I assume they're all in, former Confederate states, frankly.
That's right, pro-business.
But why are car dealers just generally Republican?
It's a really interesting question. And I think that it's kind of one of those great sort of Marxian conundrums where you'd say, especially with the electric car issue, the electric car is a threat to their profit center. The fact is that electric cars are just a better product. They don't require as much maintenance. You don't have to get the oil changed. It's just a better product. And so it requires less maintenance. But the problem with that is that less maintenance means less money for them. And so they hate electric cars for a very sort of simple material reason, which is that they make less than half on an electric car sale that they would make off of a gas-powered car sale. And that's
over the course of the lifetime of the car, because it's not just a question of how much do I make on the point of sale. It's that you've been locked into almost like a subscription service for the next 10 years that you own this car, let's say.
Right, exactly. And it's like, I think people don't even realize how expensive that subscription service is. But with electric cars, right, it just takes less to keep them up. And so that means less profit for them. The other thing is that because people are sort of uncomfortable with them, don't know them as well, it takes more to sell one. So it takes more energy to sell one. The salesman have to learn how the car works, which takes time. Like, these things are all, they sound ridiculous, but like, we're talking about huge margins on a very, very, very easy job that probably shouldn't exist in the first place. Like, any sort of incursion like that is not going to be well received. And so they don't like electric cars for that sort of very basic material reason. But the other thing is that they don't like the electric cars for an ideological reason. And that is, when I was at this convention, that was like revealed to me in this incredibly robust and stark and like kind of jarring way, is that, yes, they are invested in Republican politics because Republican politicians have been willing to protect their interests. But also, like, this machine, feeds back into itself. And so, like, Greg Gutfeld of Fox News shows up to the thing, to the convention. He's not there to talk about the economics of cars. He's part of the ideological project, and that's a big part of it.
So they just have basically like and where did it start? I mean, so I understand like the way, like, once they realize, like, okay, for whatever reason, Republican lawmakers are more amenable to doing our bidding. Our lobbying dollar goes further with a Republican politician than it does a Democratic one. And then all of a sudden it becomes sort of like a self, sort of a self-licking ice cream cone. We're gonna make, when we get together as a lobbying group, we're going to sort of like indoctrinate our people more to the right. And then, of course, you're relying on fossil fuels. Your enemy is maybe the EPA, and you like things to be local because, again, if you're the car dealer in town, not only, like you say, are you sponsoring the Little League team, but maybe you're also making a good deal for the town supervisor. I can put you in that vehicle with, like, I can give it to you cheap. You're going to get it cheaper, $500 cheaper than anybody else. I mean, there's plenty of room for that to happen, obviously. Where did it start? I mean, I can't help but think that, like, this was like one of those like California Republican type of things.
I mean, I think that maybe the critical thing to point out is that it's obviously the Little League example, I think is pretty apt for the vast majority of this country, but at the same time, car dealers make a ton of money. Like, this is a group in the top 0.1% of American earners. Like, this is one of the top 5 most common professions. There was another breakdown of like census data that
how much does a car dealer make? Like typically, how much?
It was car dealers, beverage distributors, and contractors, or maybe it was gas station owners. Those 3 jobs make up more than half of the businesses that pull in like $1.6 million or more per year. Like, this is really like the elite. Like, it doesn't seem like an elite sort of thing. It's not like a hedge fund manager, but this is what the American elite really looks like. This is what that class is really composed of. And so, like, when we're talking about tax code and we're talking about sort of a class composition, this is the very richest. These are the very richest people in America in a lot of very meaningful ways. And so, obviously, their fealty and their fealty to and their affinity for the Republican Party is kind of comes down on that. It's like the way that the Trump tax cuts were structured. Like, for one example, was basically to advantage car dealerships so that they would be immune to sort of like the tax bill that you would expect for businesses of this size that are that profitable. And it's like these family businesses, you can hand them down, they get carve outs from Republican tax policy, and like that's, I think, sort of how they found a home on this side of the aisle, and obviously have been thriving there ever since.
That's amazing. Well, it's a fascinating story, and people can check that out. But I wanted to also just touch on one other story that you've written. I guess you wrote it maybe today, about it was today. DeSantis's super PAC. This is an extraordinary story, and it just, like, we're at I mean, we've been on the brink and it's sort of like ebbs and flows, but it is extraordinary on a day where it was revealed, or last night, about this sort of, Alito and his getting a, he has his own personal billionaire as opposed to Clarence Thomas's personal billionaire. And whenever I read a story about these super PACs, I just remember, Anthony Kennedy saying like, well, disclosure and we don't have to worry, money and speech are the same thing, that type of thing. We're in this story you do about DeSantis has basically moved the degradation of our campaign finance laws to another level. Like this is a milestone in the sort of, I guess, revealing of just how decrepit our campaign finance laws are. Will you just explain what he's set up and what he's doing that is so sort of like novel?
Yeah, it's pretty astounding because I think if it works, and it may not work because you've seen his polling numbers and he's not running away with it, but he basically is like setting out a new blueprint for big money to buy off a presidential election. I mean, it's pretty astounding. So he has the super PAC, which is Never Back Down. The super PAC, I think, on a basic level, is just illegally funded. So can
we just stop for a moment and just go like, really, like Never Back Down? I mean,
yeah. Well, so it's funded. So it's funded with $82.5 million. The thing that's interesting about this is that it's almost certainly illegal by the letter of campaign finance law. So he raised $200 million in Florida while he was running for governor via his Empower Parents super PAC. But obviously didn't need to spend all that to win the governor's race in Florida. So he had $83 million still sitting there. And by the letter of the law, are not allowed to move money that was raised in a state race for a state race into a federal race. DeSantis, they just took the $82 million from Empower Parents PAC that was for statewide Florida race, moved it right into this federal race, into this federal PAC of Never Back Down. And basically it was like, we don't think the FEC is going to do anything. And if they do, it'll be too late. And so they are starting with this $82.5 million head start. And rather than, DeSantis building out a campaign with volunteers and like door knocking, the stuff that, is kind of like the fiber of American democracy and campaigning. I mean, we don't need to make it overly romantic, but that's kind of like a core function at the very least. They're having the super PAC run the entire ground game for DeSantis in 4 separate states right now. So they're spending $100 million to hire professional door knockers and run the entire quote unquote grassroots operation independently. So the super PAC is not allowed to collaborate with this DeSantis campaign. Technically, that's, again, the law as decided by the Supreme Court was that this is okay because super PACs don't collaborate with campaigns. And they're just letting their super PAC, which is, again, funded not in a legal way, do all the essential functions of the campaign. And they're just going to sit back and basically like let the super PAC run the show.
It's almost as if the super PAC is the campaign. And so you can't collaborate with a separate entity that doesn't exist because they're doing all of the functions of the campaign. Right.
And it's like, you might say like, oh, well, that doesn't sound that crazy. It's a pretty crazy workaround because you're technically I keep saying this, but technically by the FEC regulations that exist, they should have only been able to transfer $5,000 from Empower Parents PAC into the DeSantis campaign. Instead, they moved $82.5 million. So basically what they're saying is there is no campaign finance law. We will raise infinite money from whoever we want to, and we will put it to doing whatever basic campaign function we decide we need to do. And in the case of DeSantis, because he has so little grassroots support, it's like, all right, we're going to astroturf a massive, just incredible ground game. And that's what they're doing. But it's pretty astounding. Like, we've never seen anything like this.
And surely the FEC is going to crack down on this, right?
Well, the funny thing is that, yeah, the way they got this idea was from another Florida politician, Byron Donalds, who is Freedom Caucus stalwart. And he did the same thing, albeit with a much smaller amount of money when he left the Florida State House and decided to run for Congress. He moved $107,000 out of his state level PAC into his congressional race. Pretty clearly not allowed to do it, but the FEC has 3 Republican chairs and 3 Democrats. And of course, when it came time to decide on the legality of this, they deadlocked, and the Republicans said it was fine, and the Democrats said it was not fine, which does not mean that it's legal. It just means that they are, gridlocked and toothless. And that's the DeSantis campaign basically identified as a green light. They said, if Donalds can do it, we can do it too. So then they decided to do it by a factor of 800x. So
is there no other entity that can enforce campaign finance laws? I mean, I understand that we have an agency ostensibly set up to do that, but it has been designed in such a way that it really doesn't take any enforcement action, or can't take any enforcement action unless it's probably to protect an incumbent or something to that effect. But is there no other entity? Can the DOJ can't say, like, there's some clear law breaking happening over here, or did it just like, do you have to come from this special, police entity called the Federal Elections Commission to deal with it?
I think that there is the Southern District of New York, that at least that court has been pretty effective on campaign finance stuff in the past. Like the George Santos hot water, I think, is coming from there. When Sam Bankman-Fried went down, it was there, and part of that indictment was based on campaign finance law. So it's not like impossible that there may be some consequence for this. And like DeSantis doesn't get away with breaking the rules in the same way that Trump does, right? Like DeSantis would like to be Trump, and he's not Trump in a lot of ways. And one of the ways he's not Trump is like his panache with rule breaking. So it is possible. The problem is, like, either if this works and DeSantis is president, well, then there are going to be no consequences because he will just, pardon himself or whatever. He will ensure that there will be no consequences. There might not even be a Department of Justice by the time he's done, given what he said on the campaign trail. So, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, there might be some, maybe there's something down the road. But it'll take a while at the very least.
Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate. We'll put a link to all of your pieces, particularly the car dealership and this super PAC piece. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks. Oh, we went a little late today. Going to take a quick break. I think we're going to go a little bit short in the fun half today, but you can join us there by becoming a member. Join themajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only allow this show to survive and thrive, you get the free half, free of commercials. And in the fun half, you can IM the show via our app. Now, the app is free. You can pick it up at majorityapp.com. It has a lot of utility. If you're not a member, you can listen to the show live. You can watch the show live. You can call into the show. You can get all our links there. And of course, we have a link to becoming a member. But if you're a member, not only can you search our entire archive, but you can also IM the show. And sometimes we read your IM off. We read your IM off? A weird way of putting it. We read off your IM. No. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. Great coffee, tea, chocolate, great company. Co-op. Also, do not forget, before Bradley plugs what happened on ESPN, as much as what was happened on ESPN was exciting, what Emma is going to announce tomorrow, I think she should do it at the beginning of the show.
We're not going to be able to not do it now because it's just going to be looming if we don't.
Oh, yeah. She's got to do it. She has an announcement at the beginning of the show tomorrow. She's not been drafted by any sports team or anything like that. But check it out. You're going to want to know. Bradley, it's a little bit of a letdown relative to the exciting news that Em has to. What happened on ESPN on Monday?
Yeah, we had a good episode. We talked about Bradley Beal getting traded to Phoenix. The MLB Las Vegas proposals potentially going through, some discord with the Buffalo Bills, and Dwayne Wade being a great parent. So youtube.com/ESPN show for more of that, and some clips as well if you want to catch up and not stay tuned for the entire thing. So a lot of stuff at our YouTube channel or on wherever you get your podcasts.
Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, last night on Left Reckoning, we talked about a little bit of Utopia. We had a DSA member, Alex Burnell, on to talk about the Death Star bill in Texas, about rolling up local or preempting local politics and labor law. And we also talked about Wisconsin Governor Evers knifing public education after winning an election on being the education guy, giving public schools basically 40% of what he was promising, and basically greasing the wheels for a 40% increase in charter school usage in that state. Something that like Texas would have loved to do. A Democrat governor signed.
Well, why did he do that?
I am unclear. The Republic, like he's just talking about we need to work together with Republicans. It's maybe Nichols or someone close to Wisconsin has a better line on that, but I don't know what it seems like just a complete capitulation.
Horrible. Bradley Fan Club on the IM reminds me that if you're a member of this program at jointhemajorityreport.com, when you head over and sign up for the Discord, you get a little badge by your name. There's 9,000 people on the Discord. It is a massive Discord. It really is a massive. It could be the biggest Discord for a show like this that exists by a factor of 2. You guys have any other idea of like who would have a bigger Discord?
Oh, I don't know. There's some big Discords out there.
Yeah, like what? Matt?
I don't know, maybe would Chapo have a big Discord?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I'm not really on Discord, but yeah, probably Destiny.
Maybe Destiny.
Those the big online Twitch folks.
Pac-Man.
Oh, yeah, the Twitch folks.
Maybe not Pac-Man. Sorry, Sam.
All right, whatever, guys. Our Discord's great.
It's
MajorityDiscord.com.
It's big enough just the way it is, but it can always be bigger.
646-257-3920. See you in the fun app.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun app.
Oh no!
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych,
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
pussy.
Back.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the program. I'm not sure I'll turn on the phones yet. Maybe I won't at all.
Well, you got an appointment, don't you?
Yeah, I do, actually. But Rob from Dedham. Sam, when do we get to regionalizing water? Since Massachusetts has imposed stricter limits on PFAS, towns all over Mass are rushing to put in carbon filtration systems that cost millions. In Barnstable alone, this cost $12 million. In Littleton, it was $16 million. Meanwhile, Boston and some other select cities like Quincy get their water from the Quab in Western Mass. I think we should go after the chemical makers, but making small towns and the taxpayers in those towns foot the bill doesn't seem like the best approach. I mean, what should really happen is the federal government should pay for this. And then the federal government, the lawsuit should happen. The EPA should go after these people in the first place. That's the way I would do it. I don't know why we do that, but Bumbler from the Discord here. We play a Majority Report themed game of Dungeons